We are going to start today's video with a question. Who do you think is the all-time leading rusher in Oregon football history? Maybe it's LaMichael James, it could be Kenjon, or maybe it's a more recent guy like CJ Verdell. The reality is, it is none of those three players, and not only does the subject of today's video lead the Oregon Ducks in all-time rushing yards, but he also leads them in all-time rushing touchdowns. He broke almost every rushing record known to man in his high school area, was a 5-star recruit, and had all the hype in the world going into his Oregon career. After setting all these records, he was drafted really highly in the NFL, but after just 3 or 4 years, it looks like his time in the league is already over. So yeah, you're probably wondering who I'm talking about, and the subject of today's video is none other than Royce Freeman. Today we're going to talk about how he became one of the best running backs in California high school football history, his historic career with the Oregon Ducks, and why the former third-round pick has had very little NFL success, and what has gone wrong for him. So yeah, today we're going to do an entire summary of Royce Freeman, and let's get straight into it. I absolutely love making these What Happened To videos, as it gives me a chance to go back in time, revisit a lot of different teams, remember different players that I had previously forgotten about, and just helps me to expand my college football knowledge, and I hope you guys learn a lot from my videos. So if you have a subject, a team, or any sort of video you want to see me do next, please be sure to drop it down in the comment section, as I read every single comment you guys give me, and I consider everything. So be sure to drop it, and let's get started. So in order to understand how Royce Freeman became the best running back in Oregon football history, we need to go back in time and see how he became a big name to begin with. Royce was born in a small town in Southern California, and his mom was a teacher and his dad was in the military. He said this inspired him, and he always grew up wanting to be the best person he could be and learn as much as possible. He was obviously an athlete from the very beginning as well, as he was actually not allowed to play for his Pop Warner team because he was too big to be a skill player. Instead of putting him on the offense or defensive line where he could get hurt, he decided to start playing baseball, and apparently Royce enjoyed that a lot. He then broke his wrist in 8th grade, and when he went into high school, he decided he wanted to take football seriously and play the sport again. In California, there is a rule where you cannot play varsity until you're 16, and his mom did not want him going out there and getting wrecked by 18-year-olds. Unless they submitted some sort of waiver and got medically cleared, Royce was not going to be playing varsity football, but his talent was on display, and eventually his mom would give in, and on his first play, he'd return a kick. Coaches knew he was going to be a special talent, and his first offer would come from the Washington Huskies, and at that point, he knew he could play. From there, he developed a really special bond with Oregon running backs coach Gary Campbell, as the guy drove hours all the time to see him and visit him. At the time, the only thing Royce thought about the state of Oregon was that it was just covered in forest. He started to blow up and got offers from schools such as Alabama, USC, Stanford, and Florida State, and in case you don't know, all 4 of those schools produce big-time running backs. He said guys like LaMichael James, Kenjon, and DeAnthony Thomas all had different running styles, but they were all successful in Oregon's system, so Royce said he knew if he put in the time and effort, he could have a lot of success at Oregon. In terms of his actual on-the-field success, he broke the San Diego area all-time rushing record, and he was a star in the area. He said, quote, "It means a lot to have this record, especially because it happened here at home. I felt the love flowing out of the stadium tonight, most certainly." During his senior year, he had rushed the ball 256 times for 2,824 yards and 41 touchdowns, and also had 8 catches for over 100 yards and 2 scores as well. He was the San Diego Offensive Player of the Year and finished his career with 7,601 rushing yards. So yeah, he was a special player in the San Diego area and one of the best running backs in California football history, but where was he going to go? Well, it was pretty simple, as he had a really special bond with Gary Campbell, and he decided to be an Oregon Duck. He eventually committed and said, quote, "I'm a Duck. I'm done with recruiting. I committed because the coaching staff has been there for a long time, and they know what they're doing, and the program's tradition." So in case you haven't put it together by now, according to 24/7 Sports, Royce was a big-time player, as he was a 4-star recruit, the number 6 running back, and the 34th overall player in 2014. By other sites, he was considered a 5-star recruit, but by a consensus, he was going to be a star player for the Oregon Ducks and have a high impact. Going into Royce's college football career, Oregon was definitely in a different spot. Mark Helfrich was in his 2nd year as the head coach, and the offensive coordinator was a guy named Scott Frost. The quarterback was future Heisman winner Marcus Mariota, and the only other real competition in the running back room for him was Thomas Tyner. Oregon was expected to be good, and Royce would have a spectacular freshman season. In his very first game against South Dakota, he would have 2 touchdowns, and then in their thrilling win over number 7 Michigan State, he had 2 scores as well. In his first 5 games, he showed the kind of potential he had, and would really blossom into a star by the end of the season. He'd have 2 touchdowns in their win against number 18 UCLA, 4 touchdowns in their win over Washington, 2 touchdowns in their win on the road against Cal, and then 2 more in a win against Colorado. The Oregon Ducks had gone 11-1, with their only loss coming to Arizona. It's not like the Wildcats suck though, as they are ranked number 7 in the country, and they would rematch against the Ducks in the Pac-12 championship game. In that game, Royce went for over 100 yards and helped send the Oregon Ducks to the college football playoff. This was the first year of the bracket, and they were matched up with number 3 Florida State in the first round, where Royce had 2 touchdowns and helped them beat Jameis Winston. They were matched up with number 4 Ohio State in the national championship game, and Royce was only limited to 22 yards in that game, as the Ducks lost a heartbreaker by 22 points. As a freshman, Royce was spectacular as he ran for 1,365 yards and 18 touchdowns. He was named the Pac-12 Offensive Freshman of the Year and a second-team All-Pac-12 selection. Going into his second year, Royce was going to be the number 1 running back, and the guy behind him was a dude named Taj Griffin. He'd have nearly 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in their home opener against Eastern Washington, and then in a tough road loss to number 5 Michigan State, he'd have 100 yards and a score. He combined for 4 touchdowns against Colorado and Washington State, and in the last 8 regular season games, he went for over 100 yards in every single one of them. Oregon would not make it back to the Pac-12 championship, but they would be selected to play in the Alamo Bowl against TCU. They had a huge lead, but as we all know, the Horned Frogs made one of the greatest comebacks in college football history and won the game in 3 overtimes. Royce would put on a show during that game though, as he had over 130 yards and 3 scores. As a sophomore, he lived up to the hype as he ran for over 1,800 yards and 17 touchdowns and was named a first-team All-Pac-12 selection. Obviously, his hype going into 2016 was tremendous, and if he continued to have a good year, he could leave for the NFL and likely be a high pick. The 2016 season would kind of be a letdown as the Ducks would go 4-8, and Justin Herbert was just a freshman at the time. Freeman would have over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in his first 2 games, and had a spectacular game on the road against Washington State with 3 scores. For the most part, he was pretty disappointing towards the end of the year. He failed to have more than 50 yards in 4 straight games, and needed a late push towards the end of the season to even get close to the 1,000-yard mark. He finished his junior season with 945 yards rushing and 9 scores, and had they had a bowl game, I think he would have broken the 1,000-yard mark. Because of that, his stock took a little bit of a dip, and he was closing in on LaMichael James' all-time record, so Freeman decided to come back for his senior year and become the best running back in Oregon football history. Things would change going into the 2017 season as the Oregon Ducks had hired former South Florida coach Willie Taggart to be their new head man. Royce was on an absolute mission to start out the 2017 season as he had 150 yards and 4 touchdowns in their first game against Southern Utah, 153 yards and 2 scores against Nebraska, and 157 yards and 3 touchdowns against Wyoming. From there, things would get a little bit tough as he'd only score 1 touchdown in his next 6 games combined, but he was still running the ball quite well. As his senior year was coming to an end though, he would put on a show. He had 4 touchdowns against Arizona, and in his final home game, he scored 2 touchdowns and had over 100 yards and helped them beat Oregon State 69-10. This would end up being the final game of Royce Freeman's career as he would opt out against Boise State in the Las Vegas Bowl. He would finish the 2017 season with 1,475 yards and 16 touchdowns, and really started to look like his freshman year self once again. Because of that, he was named a second-team All-Pac-12 selection and became the all-time leader in rushing touchdowns in Pac-12 history. At Oregon, he broke the record for career rushing yards with nearly 6,000 and had 60 touchdowns, which was also a school record. From there, he was expected to be a good NFL player as he was invited to the Senior Bowl and was expected to be a day 2 pick. So now that we have gotten his Oregon career out of the way, what ended up happening to him? Well, he was the first Oregon running back selected since LaMichael James, as Freeman would go with the 71st overall pick in the 3rd round by the Denver Broncos in the 2018 NFL Draft. Going into the 2018 season, Freeman was expected to potentially be the main guy, as there was a lot of hype surrounding his name. Unfortunately, he'd be pushed by an undrafted rookie by the name of Philip Lindsay, and despite starting a couple of games, Lindsay became the better player and a Pro Bowler by the end of the 2018 season, so Freeman was already behind the 8 ball. He would still finish the season with 521 yards and 5 touchdowns, and showed that he had promise. Going into 2019, he was expected to step up, but Philip Lindsay became a 1,000-yard rusher, and Royce's numbers dropped to 496 yards and only 3 touchdowns. 2020 is when things became concerning for Freeman, as year 3 is when guys are typically expected to break out, but they went and signed veteran running back Melvin Gordon. From there, Gordon would become the number 1 running back, and Lindsay would be his backup, and Royce barely saw the field. He only got the ball 35 times for 170 yards and did not get into the end zone. His time was limited already, but going into 2021, it looks like are probably over in Denver at least. They signed Mike Boone from the Vikings, they have Gordon returning, and they drafted North Carolina running back Javonte Williams in the 2nd round. Freeman is the 4th back on the roster right now, and many do not believe he will actually make it when it's all said and done. His time in Denver is pretty much over, and I do believe he will be cut. I think he'll end up being signed by another team though, and maybe he can carve out a role there. If not though, it looks like Royce Freeman's time in the professional leagues may be close to over, and some would probably call him a bust. One thing I did pick up in an article is that he hopes to get into business management or become a physical therapist when football is done, and that could be on the horizon for him. So as we usually do, what went wrong for Royce Freeman? So if I go back to his scouting report, some of his weaknesses included he was slowed down by arm tackles, his jump cuts were limited, he had below average elusiveness, he had a ton of wear and tear during college, was more known as a grinder than a slasher, and lacked that explosive getaway speed to separate himself from other elite athletes. So far, it looks like all of those have come to fruition in the NFL, combining that with the fact that other guys have just been better, and he has not taken advantage of his opportunities. There was a small injury in the mix as well, but to make it in the NFL, you have to be really good, on top of your game every single week, and Royce just hasn't been able to show it yet. I hope he gets a chance to, but it's not looking likely at this point. But overall, Royce Freeman was a really fun player. Let me know what you guys think though. What do you think of Royce Freeman? Is he the best running back in Oregon history? And what player should I take a look at next? Before you go, if you want to support the channel and today's video, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button, as I really do appreciate that. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.